The voicemail came in at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening, and I almost didn't listen to it. My mother's voice on the recording was the one she uses when she's already decided how things are going to go. Clipped. Efficient. Like she was leaving a message for a contractor rather than her daughter. Heather, we've decided to keep the birthday dinner small this year. Just immediate family. You know how these things get. No need to make the drive. That was the whole message. 37 seconds. I played it twice to make sure I hadn't missed anything. I was 31 years old. I had driven that same 2-hour route to my parents' house for every birthday, every holiday, every occasion they'd ever asked me to show up for, and I had never once been told not to come. I texted back, of course. Hope it's a wonderful night. Then I sat at my kitchen table for a while and thought about the fact that my brother Owen had called me 3 days earlier asking whether I'd gotten my taxes done yet. It had seemed like an odd question at the time. I told him I'd filed in February, like I always do. He'd said, "Great, great, good to hear," and changed the subject. I thought about that phone call while I ate dinner alone. Then I got in my car. I wasn't going to make a scene. I just needed to see it with my own eyes, and I think some part of me already knew why. The lights in my parents' house were on when I turned onto their street. Both cars in the driveway plus a third I recognized as Owen's. I parked a block down the way I used to when I was 17 and coming home past curfew, and I sat there for a minute. Through the living room window I could see movement, someone crossing in front of the lamp. The particular warm orange glow of a dinner that had been going on for a while. I didn't go to the door. I don't know what stopped me exactly. Some instinct I'm grateful for now. I just sat in the dark and thought about Owen's question. Thought about the fact that my name had been on 2 joint accounts with my parents since I was 24, accounts I'd set up at their request when I was fresh out of college, and they were helping me get settled. Accounts I hadn't looked at closely in almost 2 years because nothing about them had ever given me reason to. I drove home. I made myself tea. I didn't drink. At 11 o'clock I opened my laptop and logged into my bank. The joint savings account had $43 in it. 14 months ago, it had held just over $22,000. I didn't sleep that night. I printed everything I could access, which wasn't everything. And by 4 a.m., I had a stack of transaction records on my kitchen table and a very specific kind of cold feeling in my chest that I now know is what it feels like when you understand something true that you wish you didn't. The withdrawals had started small, 200 here, 300 there, the kind of amounts that read as ordinary maintenance on a joint account if you're not paying close attention. Then they got larger. $5,000 in October, $3,800 in January, a transfer in March to an account number I didn't recognize for $6,200. The pattern, once I was looking for it, was not subtle. It had just never occurred to me to look. I called my accountant, a woman named Joanna who I'd been working with for 3 years and who has the particular gift of delivering bad news without softening it into something unrecognizable. I called her at 8 the next morning, before her office officially opened, and she called me back in 20 minutes. I told her what I'd found. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Send me everything you have and don't touch any of those accounts yet." Joanna spent 4 days going through it. She called her colleague at a financial forensics firm, a man named Douglas, who agreed to do a preliminary review. What they found together was not a simple case of a parent quietly dipping into a shared account. It was methodical. My mother had been the primary account holder on the joint savings since I'd added her name, which meant she had full withdrawal rights. Over 14 months, she had moved money in a pattern designed to stay below automatic flagging thresholds, nothing over $10,000 in a single transaction. Enough time between withdrawals to look organic. In total, across the joint savings and a secondary account I hadn't even remembered existed under my Social Security number, she had moved just under $31,000. Douglas told me where it had gone. Owen had been underwater for 3 years, not the regular kind of underwater that comes from bad months in credit card debt, but the structural kind, the kind built from a failed business, a lease he couldn't exit, a lawsuit settlement that had wiped out everything he'd saved. He owed money to his former business partner, to a collections firm, to 3 separate creditors who had progressed to formal legal action. My parents had apparently known all of this and decided, without asking me, that my savings were the appropriate solution. I sat with that information for a long time. There is a specific grief in learning that the people who raised you looked at your name on an account and saw a resource rather than a person. It doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in pieces over several days. The way a bruise develops after the fact, the full damage only visible once the body has had time to process it. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Owen. Joanna told me that confronting them directly before we had complete documentation was the worst thing I could do. They needed to believe I didn't know. If my mother suspected I'd discovered what she'd done, she would have time to prepare a narrative, to get Owen's version aligned with hers, to cast whatever I said next as emotional overreaction. I had seen my mother manage conflict my entire life. I knew exactly how she would do it. I agreed to wait. The documentation took 10 days. Joanna and Douglas built a file that accounted for every transaction, every transfer, every account. Douglas traced the secondary account, the one under my social security number that I hadn't known about, back to an application submitted in my name 2 years prior, signed with what was a close approximation of my signature, not close enough if you were looking, but close enough if you weren't. That was not a joint account withdrawal. That was identity fraud. When Douglas said that word out loud, fraud, I had to put the phone down for a minute. I called my cousin Addie that night. She is the only person in my extended family I have ever trusted completely, and she had known my mother longer than I had, in the way that cousins sometimes know your parents more honestly than you do, from the outside, without the filter of needing them to be good. I told Addie everything. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "How do you want to handle it?" I told her I wasn't sure yet. She said she'd be there for whatever I decided. My mother called me 10 days later, 2 days before my cousin Sylvie's wedding, which my entire family had been planning around for 8 months. Her tone had shifted from the birthday dinner voicemail. It was warmer now, almost careful, the voice she uses when she's managing something. She said she'd been thinking about me, that she wanted us to spend some time together at the wedding, that it had felt like we'd been distant lately and she wanted to fix that. She said she'd reserved 2 seats at the family table specifically with me in mind. I told her I was so glad she called. I told her I'd been feeling the distance too. I told her I was looking forward to seeing everyone. What I did not tell her was that Joanna and Douglas's complete file was already in a locked folder on my laptop. That I had consulted with an attorney named Mr. Caspel Hargrove 3 days earlier, and that he had reviewed the documentation and told me I had a civil case that was, in his word, straightforward. That I had already decided when and where I was going to use it. My cousin Sylvie's wedding was on a Saturday at a venue about 40 minutes from my parents' house. One of those converted farmhouses with string lights and a barn that smells like cedar and old wood. The kind of place that photographs beautifully and feels genuinely warm in a way you don't always get with weddings. Sylvie had spent 2 years planning it. She is one of my favorite people in the world, and I want to be clear that nothing I did that night was aimed at her or at what she built. I arrived early, before most of the family, and I found Adie by the bar, and we stood together for a while watching people come in. My parents arrived together, my mother in a blue dress, my father beside her with his hand at her back. Owen was with them, his wife just behind. They looked comfortable. They looked like people who had decided that what they'd done was understandable, even reasonable, and had moved on. My mother found me within 10 minutes. She hugged me with both arms and told me I looked wonderful and asked if I'd had a chance to eat. She was performing warmth the way she does when she's relieved, and I understood in that moment that she had been slightly worried about how I might behave, that she had been watching for signs. I smiled and said the venue was beautiful and asked her how the drive had been. Dinner was seated. I was at the family table as promised, between my aunt and a second cousin I hadn't seen in years. My mother was directly across. Owen was 2 seats down. The toasts happened, the first dance happened, the cake happened. I watched Owen laugh too loudly at something my father said. I watched my mother refill her wine and lean over to say something to the woman beside her. I felt the specific stillness that comes when you have already made a decision and are simply waiting for the right moment. The moment came during the open portion of the evening, when the music had shifted and people were moving between tables, the natural loosening that happens after a wedding dinner when everyone has had 2 glasses of wine and the formal part of the night is finished. My mother had gone to talk to Sylvie's mother-in-law. Owen was standing near the edge of the dance floor. I walked up to Owen. I hadn't planned exactly what I was going to say to him first. I just wanted to see his face up close before the rest of it, to look at my brother and understand what I was actually dealing with. He smiled when he saw me, easy and immediate, the smile of someone who doesn't know what you know. I said his name. Then I said, "I spoke to Douglas last week." The smile didn't disappear all at once. It changed. Something behind his eyes recalibrated and then settled into a careful neutrality that told me everything I needed to know about what he actually understood himself to have done. He said, "Who?" I said, "The forensic accountant. He's very thorough." Owen looked at me for a moment and then said he wasn't sure what I was talking about and maybe we should find somewhere quieter too. I said, "No, I think here is fine." My voice was even. I want to be accurate about that because people sometimes describe moments like this as heated, as though what was happening was anger. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something more like the opposite of grief. Grief is the moment you understand the loss. This was the moment the loss became something I could put down. I told Owen that I knew about the secondary account, that I knew about the withdrawals, that Joanna had reconstructed the full transaction record, and that Mr. Hargrove had already reviewed it, that the application for the secondary account included a signature that a handwriting analyst had already looked at and was prepared to speak to. Owen said my mother had told him it was her money too, that the account was joint. I told him the secondary account was not joint. I told him about the application. I watched his face understand what that meant. My mother appeared at Owen's shoulder approximately 90 seconds into that conversation. She had the look she gets when she's deciding in real time how to play something, the brief flatness before the performance locks in. She put her hand on Owen's arm and looked at me and said in a low voice that this was not the time or the place and that if I had concerns we should absolutely sit down together and talk about them properly. I said, "You're right, I agree, let's talk about it properly." I took my phone from my bag. I had already texted Joanna before dinner and she had confirmed the documents were uploaded and accessible. I pulled up the file, the transaction summary on top, my name and social security number on the secondary account application below that. I handed the phone to my mother. She looked at it. I watched her read it. I watched the particular stillness of a person who has spent years managing outcomes encountering a situation they cannot manage. She tried several things. She said it wasn't what it looked like, and then she said it was more complicated than that, and then she looked at Owen in a way that was almost a question, as though she was checking whether he was going to hold the line with her. He looked at the floor. My father had appeared by then. He looked at my mother, then at me, then at the phone, still in my mother's hand. I spoke quietly enough that the table nearest us couldn't hear. I told them that Mr. Hargrove had advised me I had a strong civil case for the joint account withdrawals and a straightforward criminal referral available for the secondary account. I told them I had not yet decided how to proceed. I told them I wanted them to understand exactly what I knew before any of us took another step. My mother started to cry. Not immediately, but within about 45 seconds, which is faster than I expected. The tears were real, I think. But real and strategic are not mutually exclusive with her, and I had long since stopped letting her tears be the thing that ended a conversation. She said she had done what she did because the family needed it, because Owen had nowhere else to turn, because she had assumed I would understand if she'd had the chance to explain. I said, "You had 14 months to explain." Owen said my name once and then didn't say anything else. My aunt had noticed something was happening and was watching from 2 tables over. A few other people were watching in the peripheral way people do when they sense a shift in a room without knowing the specifics. My mother looked at the watching and then looked at me and asked me very quietly to please not do this here. Please, not tonight. Please think of Sylvie. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said, "I'll call you Monday. Have Owen there?" I walked back to my seat. Addie was already there, having apparently witnessed most of it from a strategic position near the floral arrangement on the adjacent table. She put a glass of water in front of me and sat down next to me, and said, "You okay?" I said I thought so. She said, "You were very calm." I told her I'd had 10 days to practice. We stayed until 9:30. I danced with Sylvie twice. She had no idea anything had happened, which was what I wanted. This was her night, and I had been careful and I did not regret the way I'd done it. Monday came. The call was at 11. My mother cried again, longer this time. Owen said very little. My father, who had always held himself slightly apart from the family's operational dramas, said toward the end of the call that he thought restitution was the right path, and that he was ashamed. It was the most direct thing I had ever heard him say, and I believed him, and it didn't change much. Mr. Hargrove filed the formal civil complaint the following week. We reached a settlement before it went further. A structured repayment agreement with terms I will not detail here, overseen by a mediator, documented in a way that left nothing to interpretation. The secondary account matter was addressed separately. I'll say only that the handwriting documentation was persuasive and the resolution was sufficient, and I let Mr. Hargrove handle it from that point, because that is what you pay an attorney for. Owen called me 4 times in the first month. I answered the second call. He said he was sorry and I said I heard him. I didn't say I forgave him because I wasn't there yet, and I have a strong allergy to saying things I don't mean. He asked if we would be okay eventually and I said I didn't know. That was the most honest answer I had. My mother sent a card in the mail 6 weeks later, handwritten, 3 pages. I read it once and put it in a drawer and didn't respond. Not because I'm unwilling to ever talk again, but because the timeline for that is mine to set, and I am not in a hurry. And for the first time in a long time, that absence of hurry feels like something I earned. I did something for myself in the fall. There's a ceramic studio about 10 minutes from my apartment that offers an evening class on Thursday nights. I had been walking past it for 2 years, always thinking about it and never going in. I signed up. I am not good at it yet. My bowls come out lopsided and my instructor, a quiet woman about 60 years old who has probably seen 100 students like me, has the gift of showing me what went wrong without making me feel like I should have known better. I go every Thursday. I come home with clay under my fingernails and a specific kind of tired that is not unpleasant. There is something about building something with your hands. Something that takes time and attention and exists as nothing before you make it, that I find quietly clarifying. I think about that sometimes when I'm at the wheel. The money was not the hardest part. I want to be honest about that because I think when people hear a story like this, they assume the financial loss is the wound. It is a wound, but it heals in a specific way once the legal part is resolved, once the numbers are accounted for and the paper is signed. What takes longer is the thing underneath it. The particular reconfiguration that happens when people you loved as unconditionally as you know how to love turn out to have had a specific accounting of your usefulness running in the background the whole time. That takes more than a settlement agreement to resolve. I won't pretend I'm done with it, but I sleep better than I did. I know what the accounts say now because I check them and I understand them and they're entirely mine. I have a Tuesday night friend group, a thing that started as a book club and has become something less formal and more sustaining. I have Addie, who sends voice memos rather than texts, and once drove 3 hours to bring me soup when I had the flu, and who I consider one of the genuinely lucky things in my life. I still don't know exactly what I am to my family now, whether we will rebuild something and what it would look like if we did. I think about the call with Owen sometimes and the particular quality of his silence when I said Douglas's name. I think about my mother at the wedding, reading the document on my phone, and the moment I watched the management leave her face. She has always needed to be the one who holds things together. I understand that about her. I even understand how a person who believes deeply in their own necessity could convince themselves that what she did was a form of care. I understand all of that. Understanding is not the same as being okay with it, and I have stopped pretending they're the same thing. The ceramics class ends in December. I'm going to sign up for the next session. I've been thinking lately about what it means to build something that belongs to you. Not a business, not a financial account, but a life that doesn't hinge on whether the people around you decide to be honest. You can't make anyone be honest. I know that now more completely than I did before. What you can do is build the kind of record that speaks for itself, and learn to trust the people who show you over time, not just when it's convenient for them, who they actually are. If you've ever had someone treat your trust like a resource, you know the specific inventory you take afterward, not of them, but of yourself. what you missed, what you explained away, what you were too loyal to look at directly. That inventory is uncomfortable. It is also, eventually, useful. I'm still doing mine. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in a dramatic way, just in the quiet way you do, when the dust settles and you finally have enough distance to see the whole shape of something. What happened to me? What my mother did? What Owen allowed didn't come from nowhere. It grew from a long pattern of me being available, being accommodating, being the one who showed up and didn't ask too many questions. I don't say that to blame myself. I say it because I think it's true, and I think pretending otherwise would be its own kind of dishonesty. When you train people over years to expect that you will absorb whatever they need without friction, some of them will eventually test how far that goes. My mother tested it all the way. The thing about cause and effect is that it runs in both directions. Yes, my availability created a vulnerability they exploited, but my decision to wait, to build the documentation, to let Joanna and Douglas do their work, to walk into that wedding knowing exactly what I was carrying, that created something too. It created a situation where the truth was undeniable. Not shouted through a cracked door in a moment of raw feeling, but laid out clearly, on paper. In front of people whose opinion my mother cared about. She had spent months managing the story. I spent 10 days making sure the story told itself. I think about the ethics of what I did sometimes. Whether confronting her at Sylvie's wedding was fair to everyone else in that room. I made a deliberate choice to keep it contained, to speak quietly, to not make it a scene. I stand by that. What I needed was for her to understand that I knew, fully and completely, and that I had decided to do something about it. The location mattered because she had spent years relying on my discomfort with conflict in family settings to keep me quiet. I needed her to understand that particular leverage was gone. Addie told me once, a long time ago, that the most important thing she'd learned from watching her own family was that integrity isn't about being nice. It's about being consistent, doing what you said you would do, even when no one's checking, even when it would be easier not to. My mother had forgotten that, or maybe never learned it the way it needed to be learned. Owen had borrowed her version of ethics, the one where the goal justifies the method if the goal is family. I don't share that version. What I've kept from all of this, the thing that actually feels like growth rather than just damage that healed over, is a clearer sense of what I owe people and what I don't. I owe honesty. I owe reasonable good faith. I owe the people I love a genuine effort to understand them. I do not owe anyone my silence about things done to me. I do not owe anyone the management of their consequences. The ceramics class is a small thing. I know that, but there's something about showing up every Thursday and making something with my hands that belongs entirely to the hour I'm in. No history attached to it, no one else's name on it, that I find genuinely steadying. I am not good at it yet. I go anyway. I think that's the whole point.